There's almost nothing better than cooling off in the ocean surf on a hot summer day, but the sea is a mighty beast whose mood can change on a dime, and even experienced swimmers can quickly get into trouble. Signs at many beaches say no swimming unless lifeguards are on duty, guards who undergo extensive training and know what to do in a water emergency. But too many people don't listen, putting their own lives and the lives of people who try to save them at risk. That's all up next on Still Time for Joy, where we share practical advice for weathering life's storms and inspiring stories of resilience. Hello, I'm Sandra Levine, host of Still Time for Joy. My guest today is Chip Bruce, who has been captain of the Island Beach State Park Beach Patrol at the New Jersey shore for nearly 20 years and lifeguarding since the late 1970s. Welcome to the show, Chip.
Hi, Sandy. Thanks for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you've been lifeguarding for more than 45 years. What do you love so much about your job?
I think it's the draw of the ocean. I grew up on the beach, and I think helping people. I think in the end, it comes down to helping people, and it's a joy when you do help people.
And it also must be awesome to be outside by the ocean, out in the sunshine all day.
And not wearing shoes. A little sand between your toes is always good.
But you also have a job in the off season. What do you do when you're not on the beach?
Yeah, I'm a school counselor, a middle school counselor in Homedale Township.
So I heard as a teenager that you tried out for the lifeguard squad in Seaside Heights, made the squad, but your mom encouraged you to try out in Lavallette because Lavallette gave their guards 1 day off a week. So no
True.
days off at that time, or 2 days off. No days off at that time in Seaside
Right.
Heights?
At that time, Seaside Heights didn't have, I don't know what they do now, but they didn't offer a day off. You work 7 days a week. And my mother is actually the one who said, well, it'd be nice to have a day off, So she convinced me to try out for Lavallette, which was the next day. And I made the squad there. And because we had a day off, I stayed.
So now you've been at Island Beach State Park since the late 1980s and captain for nearly 20 years. For people who aren't familiar with Island Beach State Park, tell me about this New Jersey gem.
The park itself is about 10 miles long. We're surrounded on three sides by water. And one of the glorious things about it is it's a pure barrier island. So there's nothing but beach, sand dunes, different types of fauna. So it's just an absolute, as you said, gem. It's an unbelievable place.
So on the east side, you have ocean beaches stretching from one end of the state park to the other. And tell me what's on the west side.
On the west side, we have the Barnegat Bay. So again, we deal with different situations on both sides of the park and both sides of the island. And on the southernmost tip is the Barnegat Inlet.
So you must respond to all kinds of emergencies on any given day, but there are only sections of the ocean beach that are actually guarded. What is it like on a typical hot summer day at those guarded beaches?
On the guarded beaches, we get reasonably crowded depending upon the day, definitely more crowded on the weekends. We have about 13 to 14 stands that would be up. They're about 100 yards apiece. So they cover just about a mile of the beach. And there's swimming, there's boogie boarding. On the outside of the bathing area, there's fishing and surfing. So people get to really have a great experience at the park.
And what kind of training do lifeguards at Island Beach State Park undergo? You're kind of known for a more rigorous training schedule than some.
Right. I certainly don't want to diminish anything any of the other beach patrols do. But because of our unique situation, our unique environment, the guards go through a very rigorous training phase. So once they'll take a swim test, and that's usually the first weekend in May. And then once they're hired and they're officially employees, they'll begin their training. So they'll go through our rookie school, which will last basically from the swim test right up until 4th of July weekend. So they won't actually see a lifeguard stand sitting as a guard for several weeks. So their training's pretty intense. There's running involved, there's swimming, utilization of different pieces of equipment, and that training phase culminates in a test. They have to pass a written test as well as a very demanding physical test, which basically tests all of the skills that they learned during their rookie training camp.
Tell me a little bit about the test. What are some of the parameters? What do they have? How long do they have to be able to swim?
Okay, so the initial test is a 500 yard swim in 10 minutes or less, and then a 400-meter run in about 90 seconds or less. That's the initial test to get them hired and the interview. And then once we hire them, they'll go into our training program. So that starts, for example, they'll start with a minimum, and when we build up, but we'll start with a minimum of a 3 mile run, and then in the morning, and then they move on into some swimming activities and so on. So they'll build up to swimming the entire beach, which will be about over a mile at a clip. And
Wow.
then the actual test that they go through, the physical test, is a course that is 3 miles long. They have no idea what they're going to experience on that test. They'll go over the dunes individually, and every couple of 100 yards, they're faced with a different type of rescue that they'll be required to make. And they have to be able to think their way through and basically affect the rescue.
So, what are some of those rescues? They might be using a torpedo, a jet ski.
But one of the stations is a torpedo rescue, where they'll go out and they'll utilize a torp and bring the person in. Another station might be something utilizing a piece of equipment like a kayak or a rescue board. We also do neck and back injuries. So they've been trained in neck and back, how to extricate someone from the water who's potentially had a neck injury or a serious back injury. A jet ski, as you mentioned. So pretty much every piece of equipment, and I want to say a variety of different rescue scenarios.
And the training is ongoing. Don't you practice
Yes.
different skills every
Yes.
day?
Yeah, we have a rotating schedule that we set up where different days will be a test of different skills. So they have two training breaks each day. So in the morning will be a test of different skills or a reinforcement of certain skills. And then in the afternoon training break, it's actual physical PT. So it might be running, calisthenics, swimming, utilizing some of the equipment and so on.
They train pretty hard. Now, are you still in good shape? Are you able to keep up with the young guards?
I would like to believe so. I go through, and that's one of the things we're most proud of is that every guard on the beach has gone through the exact same training, and every guard goes through that same training. Additionally, we test the guards on the swim test every 30 days. So every 30 days, they have to complete that 500-yard swim in 10 minutes or less. And most of the guards pass it easily, especially with all the conditioning we do. So to answer your question, I believe I'm in pretty good shape.
So, when the guards are on the stands guarding a beach, what exactly are they looking for?
Mhm. That's an excellent question. One of the things we talk about with them is scanning. Their visual acuity in terms of watching the people and so on. But one of the first things they have to do when they come up over the dune line in the morning is assess their water. So during their training, we talk about rip currents, how to identify different characteristics in the water, different traits, different types of waves, and things like that, and also the impact of weather. So in their training, we also talk about the weather. So in the morning meeting, before they go up on the beach, we give them the day's weather, tide information, and so on. And then once they cross that noon line, they have to, the first thing is scan and identify their characteristics of the water.
So, before we go on, how do you tell where a rip current is? What is a rip current? And how do you get out of a rip current if you're caught in one?
You're looking for a channel of water where the waves may not be breaking. Sometimes it appears calmer. Sometimes you'll see like a murky brown to it. You'll see the foam from the waves that are coming into the beach flowing out to sea in like more of a channel rather than parallel to the beach in one mass. Different types of things, identifying whether or not there's a sandbar, because usually you need two things for a rip current. You need volume of water, so that would be the waves coming into the beach, and then you need some type of change in the contour of the bottom where it's deeper, and water by nature seeks its lowest point, and that's how you can identify where the rips are.
And what happens to swimmers when they get caught in a rip current?
They're they're pulled out to sea, and at in some cases at great speed. And what happens, I think the lay person or the average person sees themselves getting further away from the beach, and they begin to struggle, and your natural impulse is to try to swim towards something you're getting farther away from, and they become fatigued, and potentially could end up in a serious situation like drowning. So one of the things that we emphasize is relaxing. They can wave their arm and indicate that they do need assistance. Swim parallel to the beach, or let it pull you out, because eventually it will dissipate, and then you can swim parallel to the beach and come in.
That's pretty hard to do, to
Yeah.
just let the rip current pull you out until it
Yes.
dissipates.
And,
But
and I think probably the hardest thing is not to panic.
yeah, but the best advice besides signaling for help if you need it is to swim parallel to the beach and explain to people why that helps.
Because you're not fighting the current. And some of the literature out there on rip currents, and say, like, even Michael Phelps, one of the greatest swimmers of all time, would not be able to swim against a rip. So the rip fatigues you very quickly because you're fighting something that is so much larger than you. The ocean is a great place, but it is massive, and if you try to fight it, you will get fatigued.
So, as we mentioned, you've been lifeguarding for more than 45 years. I am sure that most of the problems occur when people are swimming where there are no lifeguards. Would you say that's accurate? Where do most of the
Absolutely.
problems occur?
Absolutely. In unguarded areas. And every year, somewhere between 4,000 and 4,500 people drown across the country. And I would say probably 98% of those are in unguarded areas. So there are many times at Island Beach where people have gone in the water in the unguarded areas and experienced trouble.
So, what happens when people go into the ocean? Perhaps they didn't grow up at the beach, they're not really that familiar with the ocean and how powerful it can be. What happens when people go in the water on an unguarded beach who are not good ocean swimmers?
Think some of the points you made in terms of not growing up, being involved in the ocean and understanding the strength of the ocean, not being able to identify hazards and hazardous areas like rip currents and things like that. I think they overestimate their ability. So I think it's a combination of factors, and they end up getting into trouble. In the guarded areas, people are much safer because the guards can identify and immediately respond. But unfortunately, in unguarded areas, and people going in the water when there are no guards on duty, there have been tragedies. So I think, if I can recall one story, there was a child who got into trouble. The water was pretty rough. There were no guards on duty, and two young men in their 20s went out to rescue him. They got to him, and they were bringing him in. And one of the young men actually got the boy up on the beach. And when he turned around, he realized his friend was now in trouble. And he went out to try to save his friend, and one of them actually drowned. So it's a very high instance where the non professional rescuer, who goes in to try to help someone, is the one who ends up drowning.
Even though there are only certain areas of Island Beach that are guarded areas, you also respond to emergencies throughout the entire park.
One of the more major rescues was one involving the inlet, and it happened to be late in the evening. We were keeping guards on duty, because the water was so rough and people were still on the beach, and we were warning them and so on. And we got an emergency call to the inlet, where a gentleman had tried to kayak out of the inlet, He was definitely inexperienced, not prepared. It was what we call big ocean, and he was reported missing, and we ended up going down there, and by the grace of God, um, uh, he had capsized his kayak in the mouth of the Barnegat Inlet. It was late at night. It was pitch black, but it was an ingoing tide, and that's ultimately what helped us find him. So we had to make that rescue in the inlet, and it was pretty perilous.
And you saved his life.
Yes.
Yes, he was able to be saved.
Mhm.
Yes, awesome. Okay, so what kind of challenges do the lifeguards face with the public? Do they always listen to what the lifeguards tell them, or what are some of the biggest concerns of lifeguards?
I think one of the biggest challenges, obviously, is educating the public. I think there's a lot of people who are not ocean people, and even those people who are. So I think our biggest obstacle is communication, getting people to understand the message that we're putting out, whether it's that there are rip currents and we're trying to keep people in close, whether the waves are big, those kinds of things. So I think cooperation sometimes is something that we wish the public would really help us with.
You mentioned the weather earlier. So,
Mhm.
when a storm is coming, that must also be a challenge to either get people out of the water or to clear the beach. Talk to me about the hazards of when storms roll in.
Yeah, I think when storms come in, one of the biggest hazards obviously is lightning, and people have perished because of lightning strikes and so on. They say somewhere around 25 people a year perish because of lightning strikes in our country. So getting people to understand, because sometimes they're sitting on the beach and it's a beautiful sunny day, but based on our, if you want to call it intel, we're monitoring the weather, radar reports from NOAA and things like that. So getting them to understand that a storm is coming in and that they need to leave the beach is sometimes a difficult task. I think consciously they understand lightning, but I don't think they fully comprehend just how dangerous it is being out on an open beach with the possibility of lightning in the area.
And in Ocean County, where our Island Beach State Park is located in Ocean County, New Jersey, and not in Island Beach State Park, but very close by, a gentleman did perish from a lightning strike this season,
Yeah,
right?
in recent years, we've had a couple of lightning strikes. There was one, as you mentioned, in Seaside Park, and then there were a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, a lifeguard was struck and killed by lightning. So I think also people, I wish they would understand that they are also endangering the people who are most trying to help them by staying out on the beach when there's lightning.
So tell me once more, what is it about being out on the beach as a lifeguard that it really speaks to your soul?
I think I grew up on the beach. It's just when I come over the bridge in the morning, the smell of the ocean just reminds me, it brings me back to my youth. I think being out in that environment, it's just nature at its its awesomeness, if that's a word. And it's just such a great feeling. And I think people understand that because that's why our beaches across the state are so crowded. I think people just get such a good feeling being in that environment. And at Island Beach, I would like to say it's a little bit more of that good feeling because it is just a barrier island. It's just nature. And then the other piece of it, I think, is just helping and protecting and serving the public. I think it's just a higher calling. That's the way I feel, and I would bet that most lifeguards would say the same thing.
You also told me you have both a son and a daughter, and your
Yeah.
daughter, who is 17 years old, is now also guarding at Island Beach State Park. How does that make you feel to be on the beach with your daughter
Yeah,
also
I
guarding?
think um, I think the beach is such a great environment for kids to grow up in. They're physically active. They're not sitting on their screens and things like that. And yeah, it was just watching my son grow up on the beach and surf every day and just enjoy that experience. And now with my daughter, having her be part of the beach patrol is just, it's becoming a family thing. I'm very proud of both of them. It's just a great feeling to see that some of what I experienced growing up is now being embraced by her in terms of, the beach and the lifeguarding piece. And I think she really embraces the service to the public, which that I think is the thing that makes me most happy.
So how many more years do you think you're going to keep doing this?
Back in the day, there was an old sea salt and I forget what beach patrol he worked at, but he was a longtime lifeguard, and I heard that he was making rescues at 80. So I don't know. I don't know. That's a pretty high bar, but as long as I can still do it and be as physically active and healthy, we'll see.
Taking 1 year at a time.
One day at a time.
Well, Chip Bruce, captain of the Island Beach State Park Beach Patrol, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
If you found today's show helpful, please share the information with someone who needs it, and follow Still Time for Joy for more practical tips on weathering life's storms, as well as inspiring stories of people who have turned their pain into purpose. Please consider supporting the work that goes into producing the show on Patreon. Follow Sandra Levine Productions on Facebook and YouTube, and learn more at sandralevine.com.